What is the best IEM for gaming? I hate this question, but I think I have a good answer for it now. Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the new Moondrop Rays, which is super relevant because that is a question I get all the time. And yeah, I find that question annoying. I apologize. It's not because I don't like helping people. It's because I don't think it's the right question to be asking, right? It's like, you're looking for the best IEM for gaming. Are you looking for something that's going to make games more exciting and engaging? Or are you specifically playing Valorant and you want to be able to hear footsteps of the enemy coming up behind you? Because those are different things. And well, even if you tell me that you're trying to hear footsteps, if you're playing Valorant or CSGO, Apex Legends, whatever, the frequency range where footsteps are is probably going to be different between them all. So the best IEM for Valorant for footsteps is probably going to be different than the best IEM for CSGO for footsteps. So yeah, there's the deal. That question kind of sucks. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to rant a little bit, but this IEM kind of solves it all. What can I tell you about this? So the Moondrop Rays, this is a hybrid IEM. It is a planar magnetic with a dynamic driver, and it comes on a DSP cable, right? You might notice this is a USB cable, which has EQ built into it, which is actually, frankly, genius as far as a solution for gaming, like we're going to talk about. And I'll tell you exactly why. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, a hybrid planar dynamic driver with a DSP cable, isn't that just a Moondrop May? And the answer to that is kind of yes. This is basically just an updated version of the Moondrop May. And by updated, I mean almost exactly the same, except this cable is technically different, and the app, the software behind it, is what is different and what makes this thing unique. And I want to talk about that in this video. So I guess before we get to that, a quick shout out to Shenzhen Audio for sending this in for review. It's 99 bucks, 100 bucks. If you want to check it out, I've got them linked in the description down below. But we are going to dive to the table. We'll talk about the physical form factor, what you get inside the box, fit and comfort, that stuff. Then I'm also going to spend some time talking about this app because I think this app is what makes this product unique and very, very interesting. Then we'll talk about sound quality, which I'm going to warn you is going to be mostly focused on music because that's what I listen to. I don't really play video games with IEMs, but hopefully I give you the intel that you need to make a decision about whether or not this is good for you, because I think, again, this is a pretty genius product. And then, of course, we'll wrap up this review with a score. So let's talk about the physical form factor. Here's the box. It's cool. It's got a gamery looking waifu on it. I dig that. It's got a little carry case, which is a pretty common carry case Moondrop includes. You know, semi-hard shell, kind of a fake leather with a zipper. And yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really go with the aesthetic of the earphone itself, but I don't mind too much. You might notice I've got this little USB extension cable poking into frame over here. It's about 6 foot long, and I have it connected to my computer right now, which is why you don't see the other end of it. But it is interesting that it comes with this because, well, again, this thing connects with a USB cable. And if you need to plug it into the back of your PC or a PC that's under your desk, a normal 4.5 foot long IEM cable is probably not going to be long enough. So it's actually smart that they included this 6 foot long extension cable. I dig that. It is USB-A on the other end, though, if you're curious or if you're keeping track. But that will bring us to talking about the earphone itself. Okay, it does also come with a full set of ear tips, which I don't have with me at the moment. But let's talk about the build quality on this IEM. And let's start with this cable, which is, it's green. It's green and purple, actually. And it is basically the same as the free DSP cable that Moondrop's been including with some of their other IEMs like the Dusk and the May, and maybe even sold it separately. But I do think that there is something different about this one. I think the hardware is probably a little bit different, and we'll talk about that more when I get into talking about the sound quality. But yeah, basically it's USB-C on one end. It's nice and, you know, braided, and behavior on it is actually quite nice. This is the best behaved green cable I've ever used. It's got a nice small Y-split. There's no chin slider, but there is an inline microphone with controls, which I guess is nice for you gamers because, you know, people, when you're playing Valorant, you need to be able to talk to your teammates. Do people do that? I don't know. I play Apex Legends where I just hit the ping button. But anyway, yeah, pretty standard cable, and then you've got your preformed ear hooks up top that terminate into 2-pin cable or 2-pin connection. So yeah, this is just a normal 2-pin IEM. You could throw this on a standard analog 2-pin cable and just plug this into a normal headphone jack if you wanted to. But really the DSP is what makes this thing pretty unique. So again, I'll talk a little bit more about that functionality in a bit. Before I get into that though, I do want to just talk briefly about the shells, which are, again, basically just a recolored version of the Moondrop May, which for me is actually a very nice thing. I really like the Moondrop May's fit and comfort, especially at the price range. Under $100, having something that is this small, kind of semi-custom molded, and just, I don't know, pretty handsome, I actually like a lot. Now, that said, I actually think the May's build quality feels a little bit nicer than the Rays. Mostly it's just the material that they use here on the resin. This feels a little bit more like a traditional plastic build. The resin on the May feels a little softer, just a little bit nicer. But the outer panel, I think I like this one better than the May. So if it were my ideal, I would put this outer panel on the black, smooth resin of the May, and that would be my ideal version of this form factor. But either way, in terms of fit and comfort, it's basically, I don't want to say basically, it is exactly the same. So there, I'll throw it in my ear. You can take a look at it, and like I mentioned, it is kind of on the small side. I would say this is like a medium small size shell, and it's even pretty small, like depth-wise. So it fits nice and flush against the ear. Those folds actually work really well for me in terms of comfort and stability, and just generally, this is like, no joke, one of the better fitting IEMs I've ever tried at any price point. So, and at $100, you know, not too shabby. Aesthetically, is it going to be your jam? I don't know. The green is not something I like that much, but apart from that, you know, I think the outer panel actually looks kind of cool. Anything else I need to talk about physical form factor? Let me pull up my notes real quick to make sure I'm not missing anything, but I don't think so. So I think we're going to dive into talking about this DSP cable. But actually, one thing to mention before we get into that is that the other Moondrop IEMs that I've tried before, they all use an app, right? The Moondrop IEMs that have a DSP cable, they all use an app that is basically only available on Android. This one doesn't use that app at all. In fact, I plugged these things into my Android phone, and they detected that it had the Rays connected, but there was no interface. There was nothing I could do with it as far as configuration. But all the configuration instead happens on their web app, which is what I'll pull up here. And to make this work, I'm gonna have to plug this thing in. Hopefully this does not disrupt my recording, because I am plugged into the same thing. We'll plug that in. Microphone still seems normal. That's good. So yeah, we'll go to the table here, and I will show you what this interface looks like, because this is what is really cool. And this all just works inside of a web app, right? And you know, Chrome tab. You don't need to install anything, which I like. So once you have the Moondrop connected, you're going to continue, and it's going to load up this interface where you can select which video game you were trying to tune this IEM for. So I guess just to step back a little bit and like catch people up, why this is such a genius solution for gaming is, like I mentioned, right? Depending on which game you're playing, and again, let's say specifically you're trying to hear footsteps in a first-person shooter game and you want to know where they're coming from. Depending on which game you're playing, the footsteps are going to have slightly different emphasis, or all the different sounds that you need to hear are going to have slightly different frequencies that they play in. And if you want an IEM that's going to emphasize those sounds, you're going to have the frequency response of that IEM matched to the game that you're playing. If you're not familiar with already, my buddy Joe over at GadgetryTech, I have trouble saying that. But anyway, my buddy Joe, he has a YouTube channel where he does these fantastic dives into the games and like analyzing the sound on these games and creating EQ targets for these games. So you can basically take any IEM or any headphone, use Joe's Squiggling site, which I'll have linked in the description down below, by the way. You can use his profiles or his targets to tune your IEM or your headphone to match what, you know, Joe thinks is a good match for those games. And I think super, super smart that he started doing that. And I don't know if Moondrop necessarily noticed what he was doing, but I kind of suspect they might have noticed what he was doing, and they basically productized what he's doing. And here with this app, with this interface, it's basically just like an easier version of this, right? You can go in here and say, like, I'm playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare. You click that button, I'm gonna hit confirm, and it's gonna upload, we're doing it now, we're doing it live, it's gonna upload a tuning profile to this cable that'll make this thing sound optimized for that game. I don't know why it's not working right now. I swear to God that works normally. But that's the genius idea of this product, is you can just tailor the sound to exactly the game that you want, and it has all of these profiles already baked into it. There's some other presets in here as well. Like if you're just playing a general AAA game, for example, right? I mentioned like footsteps maybe aren't your goal when you're talking about a gaming IEM. Well, there's a profile built for that. Here's a profile built for a music game. And then, you know, if you don't like all this, well, you can even go into, there are user-saved or user-shared alternatives, which I think is actually really cool. And they've had this kind of stuff in their Android app before, where users can share their own EQ profiles. But I think having it targeted specifically at video game use is a super, super smart solution. Of course, if you don't like any of this, you can go into this advanced tab and you have your own interface for configuring the frequency response however you like. But all this is to say, like, I think this is, where did I go? I went to the wrong spot. All this is, frankly, like, this is the way to do a gaming IEM. So next time somebody asks me, what is the best IEM for gaming? Like, frankly, this is it. Although, here's the thing I'll say, I don't play these games. Like I mentioned up front, I don't play these games personally. So I don't really have the means or the will to validate all of these EQ profiles and tell you that yes, this profile for Game for Peace, which I've never even heard of, this profile for Battlefield 1 is actually good. I don't know that. I would say that I would definitely trust Joe's profiles, which again, I'll have Joe's Squiglink site linked in the description. And if you agree with me that like Joe's profiles are pretty good, well, frankly, you can do his tuning with any IEM. You don't need specifically the Rays. But if you don't want to go through like trying to figure out all your own, you know, how to make your own EQ profile on his Squiglink site, how to import it into, if you don't want to figure all that stuff out, the Moondrop Rays does all that for you. And again, I think it is stinking genius. But how does it sound for music? Which may be a question nobody that's watching this review is asking. But that's the question I'm going to answer, because that's what I do with these things. I listen to music on IEMs. And I will just say this, the sound signature on this earphone is exactly the same as we get with the Moondrop May. I talked about that, right? Basically being a version of the Moondrop May. In fact, let me punch out here real quick. So on Squiglink, if you pull this up and then you pull up the Moondrop May, let me get that graph real quick. You can compare them, look at them both at the same time. And you can see that there are, in fact, some pretty notable differences, right? The Moondrop May's frequency response extends a little bit more into the sub-bass. There's not a lot of music content down here, so I don't think that's super obvious. But the difference that is pretty big and pretty obvious is up here in the treble. They tuned the Moondrop Rays to be a lot more relaxed in the treble, which is an interesting direction, whereas the default EQ on the May is more elevated. And then this is just to highlight too, like this is the frequency response of both of these in their default EQ profile. Like I was just mentioning, with that app, right? If I pick the Battlefield profile or whatever and upload it to this, it's going to change this line. It's going to change the frequency response. So each of those games is ostensibly going to have their own frequency response tuning, but this is what it looks like default out of the gate with the DSP cable. So I said they are the same, and obviously they're not the same here. So what do I mean? Let me punch out here and just kind of show you. I also measured them with their default analog, or sorry, what they sound like without the DSP cable, right? So if I switch over to the analog measurement and pull out both of them, you see that, oh yes, in fact, we are getting the same frequency response on the Rays and the May. So this is kind of my confirmation that they are, in fact, the same product, but they are just on a cable that has different default DSP profile. So what does it sound like? As you might imagine, it sounds a lot like the May, especially if I listen to an analog. It sounds exactly like the May. And I like that. I like the May on an analog cable. You know, I think the May sounds better on the DSP cable than it does in analog. It just tightens up the frequency response. It's a little bit less bassy, but as an analog IEM, both of these are quite nice sounding. It's just like kind of a tasteful V shape. It's a little bit on the bassy side, a little bit warm. But I enjoy it. Like the treble extends well and it gives it a decent sense of clarity while still being kind of bassy, a little over bassy and a little bit warm. But again, once you put it on the EQ, the DSP cable, like you can kind of just EQ it however you want. The thing I want to talk about next, though, is the cable itself, because this is actually an interesting point of contention. In fact, I'll just pull in the May here, since we're talking about the May a lot. This is the one that came out about 1.5 years ago or so at this point. And, okay, obviously there's a physical difference here in the DSP cable. One is purple, one is silver, and then this unit seems to be smaller. I actually didn't notice that until just now, but it's a little bit smaller of a unit. I think they've changed out the hardware here. And if people remember back here with the May, when this thing came out, there were a number of complaints that people had with the DSP cable on this IEM, including like just some weird sonic effects that you hear when songs start and stop. Like it just plays like these weird, it literally sounds like lasers or like Star Wars or something is going like, and it goes away in the background. And once music starts, it's like, okay, I don't hear it anymore. But basically every time I start and stop music, I hear it, and it's kind of distracting and kind of annoying. And they don't have that problem here anymore on the new cable. So that seems like a good reason that they switched over to this new cable. However, this cable has its own issues. I would say that the noise floor on this thing is noticeable. It's not like super loud, but even on this IEM, which is not the most sensitive IEM, it's like sensitive as an IEM is, so it is sensitive. But it's not the most sensitive IEM, and it pulls out a fairly, audible hiss. Most people probably are not going to be bothered by it. I was not that bothered by it. But what I was a little bit more bothered by is it just sounds worse, and I don't really understand why. So I set them to be, I customized the EQ. Again, I verified that they have the same frequency response on analog. So then I gave them the same manual EQ profile to make sure that they're ostensibly sounding exactly the same. But nonetheless, I always heard the Rays is sounding a little bit duller and lower in resolution. Like it just sounds a little softer in the transient attack, whereas the Rays, even though it's got the lasers going on and stuff like that, I can ignore the lasers. It sounds nice and clean, contrasty, and sharp. And overall, if I'm just listening to music on these things, I would actually pick this cable. Lasers and all, I think this is a better solution versus this one, which hisses, and mostly it's just the transient is just really soft, and I don't know exactly why. I'm not a big, source DACs and amps make a big difference, but absolutely they can make a difference in some cases. And I think this is a case where whatever DAC and amp they're using in this device is just not quite up to snuff. Even though it's got some pretty powerful EQ chops. So I don't know, frankly, that's about as much as I want to say about the Rays. I think this is a genius product. Does it work? Unfortunately, I can't really validate that for you because again, I don't play these games. I don't know if these profiles are tuned super well, but what's nice is that there is that community feature where people can share their own profiles that you can load in here, and hopefully people will start finding the best ideal frequency response for the games that they're playing, which is exactly the right way to go about finding an IEM for gaming. So the Rays is a grand success in that regard. As far as would I buy it if I'm not planning to play games? Probably not, because I think the May is just better and it's actually cheaper. I think aesthetically it looks nicer. The cable sounds a little bit better to me. And yeah, it's like $75 versus $100. I don't mind that this thing's a little bit more expensive because they did do the R&D and put in the work for that app, and that web app is a really cool solve, but for me, not something I'm going to use. So I don't know, out of 5 stars, I'll give the Moondrop Rays a solid 3 stars. It could be a 5-star, depending on your need. If you're using this in a different way than I am, this might actually be, in fact, when people ask me for the best IEM for gaming, I'm probably just going to point them to this. And if you want to check it out, I'll have it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, and I don't know why, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, join me on Discord, which I've got linked in the description as well. And I'll catch you in the next super review. Cheers.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit. Let's get it.